It's very difficult to write a 5-minute tribute to sum up someone's 93, almost 94 years of life. So I'm going to take 6.5 minutes to try and do that. You have read in your bulletin a brief summary of what Dad was involved in and the major events of his life. Dad was a man of integrity, of faith, and of generosity. He was determined, he was strong-willed, and he was adventuresome. He loved physical work, and he loved figuring out how to make something work. He was the ultimate conservationist, environmentalist, recycler, and fitness guru. He loved his family, and he was loved by his family and his extended family and his friends. He had a great sense of humor, and the twinkle in his blue eyes remained until very close to the end of his life. He attracted actually a lot of girlfriends over the years with that twinkle. There are far too many stories to tell, but here are a few of them to demonstrate some of these characteristics that I've described. When Dad was in hiding from the Germans in 1945 for 9 months, he lived in the barn of his future in-laws' home. By pedaling for about an hour each night on an old bicycle that he rigged up to be stationary and with a flywheel, he generated enough electricity in an old battery that he found to light up the odds and sods of old lights, which he connected with odds and sods of old wiring, and that way he didn't have to milk the cows in the dark. He was the only one in quite a distance that had any electricity. He was in shape to do all this pedaling because while courting his future wife, Rennie, he would cycle over 32 kilometers each way in an evening from Emmen to Stadskanaal just to grab a kiss, he said. Last year, the watch band on my dad's everyday watch broke, so he stapled it back together. Months later, when the staples tore out, he took a band from another old watch that had not worked for years, and he put that on his watch. One band of his watch was now black, and the other was brown, but no worries, that watch still worked just fine. Nothing was ever thrown out that still worked. After he and Mum immigrated to Canada in 1952, with 4 of us under the age of 5, we lived for many months in the basement of a co-worker's home. Mum always said that one of the happiest days of her life was the day we moved that winter close to Christmas into our own home. The house was far from finished, with the studs still exposed. The rafters were still open. The plumbing was not done, and there was no furnace. Thankfully, that was a very mild winter. We did have a stove in one of the rooms, and my backside is still branded with the GE symbol from backing into that while I was waiting for my turn in the tin tub. That certainly taught us that happiness does not come from wealth or material goods, but it comes from being together as a family. If Dad saw that someone needed help, he was there to help, both physically and materially. The Bookers, who have remained close family friends, moved in next door to Dad in 1956, Dad and Mum. That Christmas, my dad tried to play Santa Claus. He left a box on their front door and then took off in a run in the, I don't know how many hundreds of feet of property between their houses, trying to sneak away. Mr. Booker only figured out who it was because they found Dad's slipper in the mud. No paperwork, no greeting card was ever thrown out. When my sister Joan and her husband took over Winona Concrete, they discovered lots of papers and letters. And since then, I've also discovered many letters in Mum and Dad's home, demonstrating their quiet and generous giving. Thank you letters titled "To Whom It May Concern" or "To Our Generous Benefactor." If you needed something fixed, you didn't even have to ask. Dad would volunteer to fix it, or they provided the funds to make sure that it was fixed. And that was things like cars and roofs of houses, and we don't even know all the things that were quietly done. Dad was a man of great faith, which was demonstrated not so often in words, but definitely in the way he lived. He lived the passage that we just read from Luke. Dad was blessed with a very healthy and active life. For several years after his heart attack at the age of 78, the cardiologist encouraged him to have bypass surgery, or stents implanted, or even a pacemaker later on. He asked one cardiologist, "Why should I do that?" And the cardiologist told him, "Well, it would improve your quality of life." Dad responded that he could not imagine his life being any better than it was. And when his time came to go home to glory, that was just fine by him. He enjoyed 14 more years actively working at his air park, for which we are very blessed. A little less than a year ago, he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. Over the course of the last year, he lost his ability to walk, to move independently, and to speak. It was his hope that after living in that home for 55 years, he remained there until his death. Thankfully, we were able to do that. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who helped us enjoy him and us to enjoy the final year of his life. In the last few months, the verse from John 15:13, "Greater love has no man or no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends," has often rumbled through my brain. No greater love is shown for each other than when we set aside our own lives and our own needs for someone else. I saw this happen over and over again during the past year. There are so many people that took time to set aside their own lives for a few moments or a few hours or a few days to make Dad's life and our lives that much better. So many people visited, they sent cards, they made phone calls, and gave us items just when we needed them most. I can't name all of you personally, but I do want to mention some specific examples of love and in action, and publicly thank a couple of specific people. First of all, Dad's doctor, Dr. Woodland. We were blessed a year ago to have him as a new doctor. Absolutely the best doctor Dad could have had during the year. I will never in my life forget the home visit he made on Christmas Eve morning, when he told Dad that he was sure that Dad had questions about why he was still here. And he told Dad that from his perspective, God was keeping Dad here to teach him some more lessons about life and living. I'll never forget that. What a wonderful thing for Dad to hear. To all of Dad's wonderful neighbors, I'd be mowing grass, and you'd be there with your lawnmower behind me. Shoveling snow, there you'd be with your shovels. The hundreds of offers to help in between. The people that came over while we sat outside in the sunshine this past summer. And thanks, Rick and his crew, for those fireworks every May 24th weekend. Oh, Dad looked forward to that for months ahead of time. That was in the field beside his house. Last year, I think we had over 200 and maybe 250 people there watching the fireworks. A special thanks to his neighbors, Gino and Marissa, and their children. For 6 years since Mom passed away, you have provided wonderful Italian pastas and risotto meals. We Dutch don't make pasta and risotto like the Italians do, and we so enjoyed those. Well, Dad mostly. They always seemed to come just on the day when I hadn't planned or someone else hadn't planned something for Dad to eat. You watched for Dad's safe return home over the years. I will not forget the day that Gino almost broke down the door of Dad's house. It was a horrific storm that day. It was a few years ago. They had tried to call, Dad's phone wasn't working. Gino had been over a number of times, but guess where Dad actually was? He was up at the air park. Took him 4 different routes to try and get around the downed You know that ice storm we just had? Well, it was kind of like that, but a fall storm. Down trees everywhere, but he had taken those 4 different routes to get at the air park, and poor Gino was trying to figure out where he was. Then had snuck home in between when Gino wasn't looking out the window, his phone didn't work, and finally, just when he was about to break down the door, he'd gotten into the bathtub in between. It was one of those days. Dad came to the door and all was well. And so we gave Gino and Marissa a key so they wouldn't have to do that anymore. To Dad's church family, thank you for all your calls and visits and word of support. And I'd just like to say a special word of thanks to Dad's very good friend, Dina. Your wonderful company, your faithful, at least twice a week visits, you're bringing us the church bulletins, the DVDs, all your delicious cookies, CDs when we needed them, handkerchiefs, which I could use now, the haircutting set so we could do Dad's haircuts at home, everything. You were there for us all the way. You certainly set aside your own life for the life of your friend. Dad was there at your baptism, and you were there right to the end of his life. Thank you. And thank you to Pastor Sid for your visits, your weekly sermons that were provided to Dad on DVD. We discovered actually that it's good to watch sermons at home. You can comment all you want while the sermon's going on. And at the end of each service, we put a label on the cover of the DVD. Definitely worth watching again. Okay. Or you can guess what other things we might have written. Thank you to our wonderful extended family and many friends for your prayers, your visits, your support. For the chocolate bars, the lift sheet that was made one evening and delivered the next day by one of my cousins, the movies, the serviettes, the prayer shawls sent through my church. So many people made life so much better. Especially thank you to my many, thank goodness Mom and Dad had 6 of us, brothers and sisters, my nieces and nephews, Dad's grandchildren, my children, and my, of course, wonderful husband, who definitely set aside their own lives and their own needs to support Dad during this especially difficult past year. One of my ministers asked me one day if I was able to find God during this time of caring for Dad. I pondered that question quite a bit. At first I thought it was rather a strange question, but I pondered it quite a bit. Yes, God was always there, but he was so easily found in all of your care and all of your support. Dad showed his love of God throughout his life by setting aside his own needs for the needs of others. The best that all of us can do is remember in the future to take time, set our own selves aside, and give to someone else, even if it's just for a few moments. Thank you.